الرحيم اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا صدق الله العظيم. Respected scholars, brothers and sisters in Islam, the bounties, the favors and the boons that Allah had conferred upon the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam are innumerable, uncountable and immeasurable. وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا إِنَّ فَضْلَهُ كَانَ عَلَيْكَ كَبِيرًا. Indeed, the favors of Allah upon you, O Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are many, many. And amongst these many favors, these infinite, unlimited, immeasurable bounties of the Almighty upon the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one is the fact that Allah had endowed him with comprehensive speech. So he was a man of few words, but his words were voluminous. While many can speak for hours and you achieve no message out of it. Al-mu'minu yaqillu al-kalam wa yakthuru al-amal. A believer is a man of few words, but he is a man of action. In fact, the scholars tell us the final two advices that the Prophet ﷺ had proclaimed prior to his demise was a synopsis of his entire 23 years of prophethood in 2 words. If somebody asks you summarize today in 2 words, you will grapple. And the Messenger ﷺ summarized his 23-year life of prophethood in 2 words. He said, As-salata wa ma malakat aymanukum. Fear Allah with regards to the performance of prayer. As Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu said, Man aqamaha faqad aqama ad-din, wa man dayya'aha fahuwa lima siwaha adya'. That if you establish prayer, you've practically established religion in terms of your obligation to your Creator. And if you're negligent with regards to prayer, the likelihood is that you would be negligent in other aspects. Someone said in the Urdu language, Kuch log kehte hain mere rag mein nabi nabi, lekin padhte hain namaz hafte mein kabhi kabhi. Kuch log kehte hain mere rag mein nabi nabi, lekin padhte hain namaz hafte mein kabhi kabhi. नबी का नाम सुनते ही झूम जाते हैं, नबी का हुक्म सुनते ही घूम जाते हैं. Some people say my entire DNA and anatomy is immersed in the love of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But how ironical, they observe prayer only occasionally. What a contradiction in their statement and action. On hearing the name of the Prophet ﷺ, they sway with joy and excitement, and rightfully so. But tragically, when hearing the directives and the injunctions of the Messenger ﷺ, they take a U-turn and they move away. So, as-salah, prayer, وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, and be kind to your subjects and your subordinates. And if a person can be kind to his subject and his subordinates, where he enjoys a degree of authority, he can manage his authority and not exploit and abuse. Sayyidina Luqman said to his son, إِذَا دَعَتْكَ قُدْرَتُكَ عَلَى ظُلْمِ النَّاسِ فَتَذَكَّرْ قُدْرَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ. When your authority provokes you to incite, then remind yourself that Allah has much more authority over you. So the Prophet ﷺ's last 2 words were take care of prayer and be kind to your subjects. Be kind to your subordinates. And like Maymun, a great scholar, said that you should be so kind to your subject, your subordinate, your employee, that if Allah has to one day reverse the economic table and give your employee or your subject or your subordinate strength and muscle over you, then he must find no reason to take revenge from you. When we analyze the final advices of the Prophet ﷺ in his farewell sermon, you will be amazed that every statement was there for nation building and uniting the ummah. So the narration goes, a Sahabi says, I was holding on to the reins of his camel, and we all had converged around him. And he said, Ayyuhan nas, O people, do you know, هل تدرون في أي يوم أنتم وفي أي شهر أنتم وفي أي بلد أنتم? Do you know the month, the day and the location? We said, في يوم حرام, بلد حرام, شهر حرام. It's a sacred month, it's a sacred location, it's a sacred day. He said, now listen, and this was the beauty of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As parents, as guardians, as custodians, we learn from the methodology. So the noble companions were passing by, and they passed by the carcass of an animal, a carrion, which was giving off a stench and an odor. And as they passed by, everybody blocked their nose due to the stench. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam observed this. It was repugnant, it was unpleasant, and he plugged in, he tapped in. He said, would you take that for a dirham? They said, we won't take it for free. He said, well, the world holds less value in the eyes of Allah than this animal holds in your eyes. The point I'm saying is that at the right moment, the Sahaba was sitting and they're looking at the moon and they're enjoying it. He said, as you enjoy viewing the moon from your respective location, on the day of Qiyamah you will enjoy seeing the countenance of the Almighty from your respective paradise. Wallahu yawma idhin narahu kama nara qamran bada lis-sitti ba'da thamani. So he said, as today being sacred, the month being sacred, the location being sacred, now listen to this. فَإِنَّ أَمْوَالَكُمْ وَدِمَاءَكُمْ وَأَعْرَاضَكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ حَرَامٌ كَحُرْمَةِ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا. These were the final advices, nation building. The blood of each person, the honor of each person, and the wealth of each person is sacred, just as the sanctity of this day. We all know the lofty rank that Aisha radiallahu anha enjoyed, and the proximity she enjoyed with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I just share with you a few couplets for the benefit of those who know Arabic, and then I will take you to the point I want to mention. The poet encapsulates the privileges of Aisha radiallahu anha, in which he says, إني خصصت على نساء محمد بصفات بر تحتهن معاني وسبقتهن إلى الفضائل كلها فالسبق سبقي والعنان عناني مرض النبي ومات بين ترائبي فاليوم يومي والزمان زماني زوجي رسول الله لم أر غيره الله زوجني به وحباني وأتاه جبريل الأمين بصورتي فأحبني المختار حين رآني أنا بكره العذراء عندي سره وضجيعه في منزلي قمراني وتكلم الله العظيم بحجتي وبراءتي في محكم القرآن والله خفرني وعظم حرمتي وعلى لسان نبيه براني والله في القرآن قد لعن الذي بعد البراءة بالقبيح رماني والله وبخ من أراد تنقصي إفكا وسبح نفسه في شأني إني لمحصنة الإزار بريئة ودليل حسن طهارتي إحصاني والله أحصنني بخاتم رسله وأذل أهل الإفك والبهتان وسمعت وحي الله عند محمد من جبريل ونوره يغشاني أوحى إليه وكنت تحت ثيابه فحنى علي بثوبه خباني من ذا يفاخرني وينكر صحبتي ومحمد في حجره رباني. It's amazing couplets on the lofty rank of Aisha radiallahu anha. She says, I was with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam under one duvet when revelation would come to him. I was nurtured in his lap. I am the person that in my room are two moons. One is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and one is my father Abu Bakr. And Allah lashed out at those people who accused me, and Allah exonerated me in the Quran. Yet on one occasion, our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, inadvertently, she made a remark, and she said regarding her co-wife, حَسْبُكَ مِنْ صَفِيَّةَ كَذَا وَكَذَا تَعْنِي قَصِيرًا. O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, your wife Safiya, my co-wife, she's short in her stature, she's short. It was not deliberate, it was not malicious, it was not intentional, it was a slip. But what was the teachings of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And how casually we utter things that hurt the feelings of people. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لَقَدْ قُلْتِ كَلِمَةً. Oh Aisha, you have uttered a statement. لَقَدْ قُلْتِ كَلِمَةً. You've uttered a statement. If it has to be given a solid form and diluted into the water of the ocean, لَمَّزَجَّتْهُ, it will overpower and contaminate the waters of the ocean. Now imagine when that statement is diluted with your actions, what is it going to do? And Aisha was a pure and a chaste and a noble woman. When you and I are going to do this and attack the honor of someone, then where do we leave the ummah? The Urdu poet said it, and I'll share some couplets with you again. अब तो दरिंदों से न हैवानों से डर लगता है, क्या ज़माना है कि इंसानों से डर लगता है। अब तो दरिंदों से न हैवानों से डर लगता है, क्या ज़माना है कि इंसानों से डर लगता है। इज़्ज़त-ए नफ्स किसी शख्स की महफूज नहीं, अब तो अपने ही निगहबानों से डर लगता है। खूरेज़ी का ये आलम है कि खुदा खैर करे, अब तो मुसलमानों को मुसलमानों से डर लगता है। The poet says, I am not threatened by predators. I'm not threatened by lions. We stoop so low that I'm threatened by humans. The honor of no person is safe in the world in which we live. You see a lion, you say, now we can deal with it. You see a predator, but that man, I want to run far, he's got a sharp tongue. When he speaks, it's venom. When he throws out, it's poison. And yet another Urdu poet said, जब मैं चल नहीं सकता था तो लोग मुझे गिरने नहीं देते थे, और जब से चलना सीखा तो कदम कदम पे गिराते हैं। जब मैं चल नहीं सकता था तो लोग मुझे गिरने नहीं देते थे। When I couldn't walk in life and I was taking my baby steps and I was a toddler, then everybody was out there to rescue me. Don't let him fall, rescue him, protect him. And as I evolved and matured and I started walking, lo and behold, everybody is there just to drop me. बचपन में अपने बाएं से दिन में 10 मरतबा लड़ते थे, मगर सोने से पहले गले लगाते थे। बड़े होकर जो एक मरतबा लड़े तो 10 साल तक बात नहीं करते। When I was a kid and myself and my brother had a squabble, we would fight 10 times in a day, but before sleeping we would hug one another and then retire to bed. But when we grew up, one argument and we don't speak for 10 years. And it continues and it continues. So what did the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? فَإِنَّ أَمْوَالَكُمْ وَأَعْرَاضَكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ حَرَامٌ كَحُرْمَةِ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا. That just as you appreciate the sanctity of this day, the sanctity of this month, the honor of every believer is equally sacred. And then what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? He said, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ أَيِّسَ أَن يُعْبَدَ بِبِلَادِكُمْ. The devil has given up hope that idolatry will be ignited here again. وَلَكِنَّهُ فِي التَّحْرِيشِ بَيْنَكُمْ. But he has changed strategy. And his strategy of dividing you now, and his strategy of misleading you is that he will sow within you the seeds of discord and bickering. The Arabic poet said, هذا زمان ليس إخوانه بإخواني. هذا زمان ليس إخوانه بإخواني. إخوانه كلهم ظالم لهم لسانان ووجهان. يلقاك بالبشر وفي قلبه داء يواريه بكتمان حتى إذا ما غبت عن عينيه رماك بالزور وبهتان هذا زمان هكذا أهله بالود لم يصدق اثنان فكن مفردا دهرك وحافظ نفسك في بيت وحيطان. He said, we live in a world هذا زمان ليس إخوانه بإخواني. Brothers are no longer brothers. إخوانه ليس بإخواني. لهم لسانان ووجهان. لهم لسانان ووجهان. The average human has two tongues and two faces. يلقاك بالبشر وفي قلبه داء يواريه بكتمان. He has the superficial smile on the face, but internally there's hypocrisy. You know, I'm just sharing these couplets with you, but they are profound. Someone said in the Urdu language, मुझे बचपन का वो जमाना अच्छी तरह याद है कि घड़ी किसी किसी के पास होती थी, वक्त हर एक के पास होता था. I remember that time of my life when owning a watch was a privilege, but everybody had time. Today every man has a watch, but nobody has time. Nobody has time for one another. لهم لسانان ووجهان يلقاك بالبشر وفي قلبه داء يواريه بكتمان حتى إذا ما غبت عن عينيه رماك بالزور وبهتان. We move on. As I mentioned, every advice of the Prophet ﷺ was towards nation building. What did he then say? أيها الناس, O people, إن ربكم واحد, your Lord is واحد, وأباكم واحد, your ancestor is one. لا فضل لعربي على عجمي ولا لعجمي على عربي إلا بالتقى. There is simply no recognition, merit, significance or virtue for color, creed or ethnicity. Everything revolves and evolves around piety and taqwa. And again the Arabic poet said, الناس من جهة التمثيل الناس من جهة التمثيل أكفاء أبوهم آدم والأم حواء نفس كنفس وأرواح مشاكلة وأعظم خلقت فيهم وأعضاء فإن يكن لهم من أصلهم حسب يفاخرون به فالطين والماء ما الفضل إلا لأهل العلم إنهم على الهدى لمن استهدى أدلاء. When we look into the annals of Islamic history, we will find Sa'id ibn Jubair, who was the distinguished student of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu. In one tafsir, somebody describes him so aptly, and I really love this description. كان أسود اللون أبيض الخصال. Subhanallah. They say he was a man of dark skin but white heart. He was a man of dark skin but white attributes. And it's the attributes that matter. Remember Abu Lahab, the uncle of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was an Arab, he was a Quraysh, he was a Hashmi, he was a Sayyid. In fact, the Arabs referred to him as Lahab. Lahab means flame, because he was fair in complexion and he had these flamey cheeks, which was symbolic to beauty. So the Quran preserved that very same reference in the Quran, but not because of his beauty, but because of the flames of hell. Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. And hence the Arabic poet said, لا تترك التقوى اتكالا على النسب فقد رفع الإسلام سلمان فارس وقد وضع الشرك الشريف أبا لهب. That in the eyes of the Almighty, it is piety that matters. Now we know today we had a lovely panel discussion, and I want to mention this in the final advisor that the Prophet ﷺ had given, in which he had destroyed racism from the root. He said there is simply no recognition for color or creed, and everything revolves around piety and taqwa. And there's a beautiful incident mentioned regarding Ata ibn Abi Rabah of African origin, a great scholar, Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik, and these are the teachings of Islam. Islam is rich with these teachings. Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik, who was the king of the time, is performing tawaf of the Kaaba. And behind him are his two young lads, كَأَكْمَامِ الْوَرْدِ نَضَارَةً. They are like blossoming flowers. And when Sulaiman completes his tawaf, he then asked, where is Ata ibn Abi Rabah? So they said, he's performing prayer in the corner of the haram. So he gradually inches. And as he inches, with him is his entourage and his cavalcade. وَهَمَّ الرِّجَالُ الْحَاشِيَ بِأَنْ يَتْبَعُوا الْخَلِيفَ وَيَفْسَحُوا لَهُ الطَّرِيقَ. So they come forward to try and clear the crowd, and he backs them off. He said, listen, this is the house of Allah, and here it is piety that makes you a VIP, and it is not your political status or your complexion that makes you a VIP in the court of Allah. And as he comes close and his children's anxiety is piercing, who's the man my dad wants to meet? He can just twitch his eyes and people would be around him on his beck and call. And lo and behold, when they come, they find this dark-skinned person, akhtasul an, not very striking features, mufalfalu sha'ri, not the very impressive look. And when they come close, it is none other than Ata ibn Abi Rabah. And then an announcer proclaims, لا يفتي في هذا المقام إلا عطاء. Nobody has the authority to issue a ruling or a verdict or pronounce a ruling on Islamic jurisprudence in the precincts of the Kaaba other than Ata ibn Abi Rabah. And that is the status and the recognition that Islam gives. It is purely on piety. I come from a place, South Africa, where tragically we were victims of systematic apartheid. But ultimately, oppression will be dismantled. And that again brings me to one of the 13 advisors of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ اسْمَعُوا. O people, listen to me attentively, تَعِيشُوا. You will live a pleasant life. Isma'u, listen to me attentively, ta'ishu, you will live a pleasant life. And what did he say? Ala la tadlimu, ala la tadlimu, ala la tadlimu. Don't oppress, don't exploit, don't abuse. Again, there's an incident of Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik, that once he met with Abu Hazim. Long story short, I just share with you one point on the harms of oppression. May Allah protect us from it. So, Abu Hazim rahimahullah is sitting. So Sulaiman the king asked him, in the Kamal, do you have any wealth? He said, yes, I have 2 types of assets. So he said, what are your assets? He said, Al-Rida bima qasam Allah wal-Iyas amma fi aydin nas. I have satisfaction on what Allah has decreed, and I have disinclination to the assets of people. Someone said in the English language, some people are so poor, the only thing they own is money. And some people are so rich, the only thing they don't own is money. Some people, and I want to also pay tribute to Junaid Jamshed, may Allah grant him a lofty abode in Jannah. I had also conducted some interviews on one trip when we were coming to reviving the Islamic spirit, and we boarded the flight in Dubai, and we both were in business class, and being probably patriotic to the airline, I was fortunate enough to be upgraded to first class. And he looked at me and he said, Ji haan, Jannat mein bhi aise hi hoga, aap to aage chale jayenge. And I chuckled. And when I heard of his death, and I said, Junaid, you are gone ahead of me, my brother. You are gone ahead of me. I just hope I can board the flight of Iman, and may Allah make it possible for us all. Amen. So some people are so poor, the only thing they have is money. Some people are alive after their death, and others are dead while they're physically alive. These are the words of Imam Shafi. قَدْ مَاتَ قَوْمٌ وَمَا مَاتَتْ مَكَارِمُهُمْ. Some people have moved on, but their character has kept them alive post their demise. وَعَاشَ قَوْمٌ وَهُمْ فِي النَّاسِ أَمْوَاتُ. And others are physically alive, yet the masses are praying for their death. So he says, what wealth do you have? He said, I have 2 types of wealth. One is I trust in the treasures of the Almighty, and I don't have any interest in the things of the people. He said, okay. Then he says, let me ask you a question. In the crisis in which I find myself, how can I free myself? People say, I'm in a catch-22 situation, I'm in a tight spot. He says, it's very simple. Whatever you've abused and exploited and usurped, return it to the rightful owner.
He said, but who can do that? This is Sulaiman asking Abu Hazim. He said, the man who fears death and reckoning and the interview with his creator, for him to do anything is simple. So he said, okay, leave the topic, pray for me, pray for me. You're a sage of the age, you're a pious person, pray. He said, مَا يَنْفَعُكَ دُعَائِي وَيَدْعُو عَلَيْكَ مَظْلُومٌ مِنْ وَرَاءِ الْبَابِ. And this is serious stuff. He said, I might be a pious person as you perceive me, and I can pray for you. But outside this curtain, there are 1,000 people that are victims of your oppression, and they are cursing you. My prayer will never able to suppress the curse of the victims of your oppression. Until and unless you don't settle the injustices, and you don't address the discrepancy and the disparities, and the hadith that we all know that is in Bukhari, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Dharr says, I was walking, and one person makes mention, Imam Bukhari says that I heard from Sulaiman ibn Harb, and he says, حدثنا شعبة, we heard from Shu'bah, and Shu'bah says, I heard from Wasil al-Ahdab, and Wasil al-Ahdab said, I heard from Ma'rur, and Ma'rur says, لقيت أبا ذر بالربضة, I met Abu Dharr in Rabda, وعليه حلة وعلى غلامه حلة, that the master and slave were clad in a common garb, and I couldn't identify and differentiate who was the master and who was the slave. And I'm like, Abu Dharr, what's this all about? He said, yeah, well, you know what, brother, I pronounced a remark which was derogatory, which was inflammatory, which was condescending, vituperative, and it hurt the feeling of a person. And Imam Nawawi says, Siyaq al-Hadith yadullu ala anna al-masbuba kana abdan, that it was referring to his very same servant. But there's one point I want to mention here, and just focus on this point. So I said, Yabna Sauda, oh, the son of a dark lady, of a dark-skinned person. And the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Ya Aba Dharrin, innaka mru'un fika jahiliya. Abu Dharr, you have changed, you've evolved, you've reverted, you're a great man, you're a legend. But there is this trace that is within you. Imagine, in Abu Dharr there was one thing left, one. Us, unfortunately, our entire existence is somewhat immersed in these forms of ignorance. By and large, I'm talking of myself, and I'm not generalizing on every person. And Hafiz ibn Hajar writes that يُظْهَرُ لِي أَنَّ ذَلِكَ كَانَ مِنْ أَبِي ذَرٍّ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَعْرِفَ تَحْرِيمَهُ. It was highly possible that Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu didn't know this before, and hence he uttered this innocently. But immediately the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam cut it, curtailed it, and stopped it. And then Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu took a drastic measure, and the words of the Arabic text are so beautiful. لفظ الحديث يدل على لفظ الحديث لا يدل على اشتراط المواساة. لفظ الحديث يقتضي المواساة لا المساواة. So the narration suggests that you must be kind to your servant and not necessarily equate him to you. But Abu Dharr elevated it, and he didn't take it on the bare minimum of just being kind. He elevated it to such a level that from that day onwards, Abu Dharr and his slave wore the same clothing, ate the same food, that if a passerby or a stranger looked, he had difficulty in differentiating who the master was and who the slave was. What were the teachings that the Prophet ﷺ said towards his end? Amongst the final advices, my time is running up very swiftly. As time started drawing close, he said, خُذُوا عَنِّي مَنَاسِكَكُمْ. Learn from me and take from me, because I doubt we will be meeting again. I doubt we will be meeting. And in those final advices that he conveyed to us, he said to us, تَصَدَّقُوا. تَصَدَّقُوا. Oh people, make charity a common practice. Now we're hearing about the carnage, we're hearing about the catastrophe, we're hearing about what's unfolding in the world. What they say in Arabic, إِنَّ أَخَاكَ الْحَقَّ مَنْ يَضُرُّ نَفْسَهُ لِيَنْفَعَكَ وَمَنْ إِذَا رَيْبُ الزَّمَانِ صَدَّعَكَ شَتَّتَ شَمْلَهُ لِيَجْمَعَكَ. إِنَّ أَخَاكَ الْحَقَّ, your true brother is one who would take harm on himself to benefit you. And when you are in pain, he will shatter himself to gather you. And yet they say in Arabic, another proverb which is very profound, صَبْرُكَ فِي مُصِيبَتِكَ خَيْرٌ مِّن جَزْعِكَ وَجَزْعُكَ فِي مُصِيبَةِ أَخِيكَ خَيْرٌ مِّن صَبْرِكَ. It is better for you to persevere on your own pain than to moan and groan and react. and it is better for you to respond to the pain and the atrocity of others than being silent. And there's a beautiful narration in Ibn Hibban regarding the virtue of charity, which was amongst the parting advisors that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had conveyed to us in his final sermon of Hajjatul Wada. In that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes mention of a person in the previous nations, I'll run you through it quickly, that he had worshipped Allah in seclusion and in isolation for a few decades. And after a few decades he decides to come down from his monastery. And as he comes down, there was some nice gentle rain and the lawn was green and lush. And in the close by proximity he sees a woman strolling by, and the devil gets the better of him, and they come up close and they become intimate. And before he can restrain himself, tragically he succumbs to his weakness and he perpetrates the ultimate evil. Often youth ask this question, and I just have a flash of some Arabic couplets. I will share it with you quickly. There is an incident mentioned of Ismail rahimahullah. He says, I came to Banu Udra in the Yemen tribe in the search and the quest of learning the Arabic language. So when I got there, I seen one youngster had written this on a plaque. أيها العشاق أخبروا بالله إذا اشتد وجد بامرئ كيف يصنع. Or people help, sometimes you'll find graffiti on the wall, or you'll find it somewhere probably, at some location, somebody made a remark or said I was here, or I was thinking of you, or whatever else it is. Anyway, I found this written on a plaque saying that I'm infatuated over a woman, please help me in my infatuation. So I wrote a note and I said, يُدَاوِي هَوَاهُ وَيَكْتُمُ سِرَّهُ وَيَصْبِرُ فِي كُلِّ الْأُمُورِ وَيَفْقَهُ. I said to the person, whoever he was, I said, treat your malady. These are spiritual maladies that are within us, whether it's racism, whether it's pride, whether it's arrogance. There is arrogance over wealth, there is arrogance over piety. Arrogance over piety is worse than the arrogance over wealth. We're not condoning one, but we don't focus on that. Mutarrif ibn Abdullah used to say, لَأَنْ أَبِيتَ نَائِمًا وَأُصْبِحَ نَادِمًا أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِنْ أَنْ أَبِيتَ قَائِمًا وَأُصْبِحَ مُعْجِبًا. If I didn't spend the night in nocturnal prayer, in tahajjud, and I get up regretting, I feel that's better for me than spending the night in worship and getting up proud and arrogant and haughty that I'm better than someone else. So anyway, I wrote the يُدَاوِي هَوَاهُ وَيَكْتُمُ سِرَّهُ وَيَصْبِرُ فِي كُلِّ الْأُمُورِ وَيَخْضَعُ. The next day I came back, it was written there, كَيْفَ يُدَاوِي وَالْهَوَى قَاتِلُ الْفَتَى وَفِي كُلِّ يَوْمٍ غُصَّةٌ يَتَجَرَّعُ. Listen brother, whoever took the time to advise me, I must persevere. Easier said than done. How do I persevere when every day I'm dying a fresh death in my crave, in my yearning, in my pining, in my fantasy? So the following day I came back and I wrote again. I said, listen, either you crush the evil in you, or then it will crush you for the rest of your life. Either you destroy the evil in you, or then it will destroy you. We will be then, vehicles and vessels of ignorance that will be thrown out. And hence Imam Shafi rahimahullah said, اصبر على مر الجفا من معلم فإن رسوب العلم في نفراته ومن لم يذق مر التعلم ساعة تجرع ذل الجهل طول حياته. You rather content with the bitter molding of a tutor than living with the bitter consequences of ignorance for the rest of your life. And he said the following day when I came there, I seen a note written there, and it was written there, سمعنا وأطعنا ثم متنا فبلغ سلامي إلى من كان للوصل يمنع فهنيئا لأصحاب النعيم نعيمهم وللعاشق المسكين ما يتجرع. If you understand Arabic, good luck. If not, tough luck. Time is running out. Anyway, so he says that I unfortunately succumbed to my evil and I committed the act of zina. And then while I was taking a shower, a ritual bath, there was a beggar that came by and I offered him some food and bread and he took it and he went by. And the man passed on. And then his years of worship was matched against the act of zina. And when it was matched against the act of zina, the zina was more severe than his 60 years of worship. But when the act of charity was paired up with the 60 years of worship, it overpowered the zina and Allah forgave him and pardoned him. So, I'll leave you on these words, my time has expired. And the Prophet ﷺ then asked the Sahaba, because those were the few advisors, the time that I had, he said, أَلَا هَلْ بَلَّغْتُ, have I conveyed my message? And they said, بَلَّغْتَ الرِّسَالَةِ أَدَّيْتَ الْأَمَانَ نَصَحْتَ الْأُمَّةِ "O Prophet ﷺ, you have delivered your task, you've conveyed your message, you have eloquently conveyed it." He then raised his finger, he said, "Allahumma shahad, Allahumma shahad, Allah you be my witness, Allah you be my witness." And he said, "You will be questioned regarding me on the day of Qiyamah." And then he said, فَلْيُبَلِّغِ الشَّاهِدُ مِنْكُمُ الْغَائِبِ فَرُبَّ مُبَلَّغٍ أَوْعَى مِنْ سَامِعٍ. I ask all those that are present here, take my message forward. And I conclude on that very same note, that as the Prophet ﷺ had entrusted us to relay his message, to amplify his message, we are ambassadors of his deen at this time. And I say this often and common and repeated, that stand up tall and stand up high and be true ambassadors of this faith. And if for some weakness or feebleness or inability you cannot be an ambassador of deen, then for heaven's sake don't be an obstacle of deen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
www.attableek.com, the reviver of